Hello everyone, my name is Alejandra or Ale, and I'm a native Spanish teacher at Spanish Fluency Club. At SVC, we help Spanish learners actually use the language through like classes, conversation practice, grammar, pronunciation, and lots of opportunities to speak Spanish with real people. And today we're going to talk about something that confuses almost every Spanish learner at some point. Por versus para. They can both translate as for in English, which is exactly why they can be so confusing. But don't worry, instead of memorizing a huge list of rules, I'm going to show you a much easier way to understand the difference. Before we look at individual rules, I want you to remember one main idea. When you say por, think about why, a reason, a cause, something that explains why an action happened. When you see para, think about what for? A purpose, a goal, something you're trying to achieve. So, por is why, para is what for. This isn't going to solve absolutely every situation in Spanish, but it's an excellent starting point, and you will see why in the next example. Look at these two sentences. The first one is estudio español por mi trabajo. And the second one is estudio español para mi trabajo. And here's the interesting part. Both sentences can be correct, okay? But they don't communicate exactly the same idea. If I say estudio español por mi trabajo, my job is the reason I'm studying Spanish. Maybe my company asked me to learn Spanish, maybe I need it because of something happening at work. My job explains why I'm studying. But if I say estudio español para mi trabajo, I'm focusing more on the purpose. I'm learning Spanish because I want to use it at work. So again, por is the reason, para, purpose, okay? That's the basic difference we're going to build on. Let's start with por. One of the most common uses of por is to express a reason or a cause. For example, gracias por tu ayuda. Thanks for your help. Why am I thanking you? Because of your help. Another example, no salimos por la lluvia. We didn't go out because of the rain. Why didn't we go out? Because of the rain. Oh, lo hice por ti. I did it for you. You're the reason I did it, okay? And estoy cansado por el trabajo. I'm tired because of work. So when you're talking about the reason behind something, ask yourself, why? If your answer explains the cause of the reason, there is a good chance you need por. We also use por when we're talking about movement through, around, or within a place. For example, caminamos por el parque. We walk through or around the park. The park isn't necessarily our final destination, it's the area we're moving through, okay? Another example, pasé por tu casa. I passed by your house. Your was somewhere along my route. We can also say, viajamos por Argentina. We travel around Argentina. O caminamos por el centro. We walk around downtown. So imagine movement happening inside an area or along a route. That's another very common use of por. Another important use is exchange. For example, pagué $20 por el libro. I paid $20 for the book. $20 in exchange for the book. We can also say, te cambio mi café por tu té. I trade my coffee for your tea. One thing is being exchanged for another. Or, compré el teléfono por $500. I bought the phone for $500. So when there is an idea of price payment and exchange, we normally use por. Okay. We can also use por when talking about a method or means of communication. For example, te llamo por teléfono. I'll call you by phone. Te envío el documento por email. I'll send you the document by email. O hablamos por WhatsApp. We talk through WhatsApp. But here's something important. Don't try to translate every English by into por. For example, in Spanish we say viajo en avión, not viajo por avión. So these rules are useful, but Spanish doesn't always work through direct translation, and that's exactly why hearing and using the language regularly is so important. Okay. We talk about por, now let's move to para. This time I want you to imagine an arrow pointing forward. Para often points toward something, a purpose, a destination, a recipient, or a deadline. So instead of asking, why does this happen? We're often asking, where is this going? Or why is this for? Let's look at each other, okay? Probably the most important use of para is purpose. Estudio para aprender. I study in order to learn. Why do I study? Well, be careful here. We're not really talking about the cause, we're talking about the goal. What do I study for? To learn. Another example. Trabajo para ahorrar dinero. I work in order to save money. My goal is saving money. Or practico español para hablar mejor. I practice Spanish in order to speak better. Speaking better is my goal. And voy al gimnasio para sentirme mejor. I go to the gym in order to feel better. So whenever there's a clear objective, ask yourself, what for? That's a strong sign for para. Para can also express destination or direction. For example, salimos para Madrid mañana. We're leaving for Madrid tomorrow. Madrid is the destination. O este tren va para Barcelona. This train is heading to Barcelona. And nos vamos para México. We're heading to Mexico. Now, one quick note. With verbs such as ir, you are also going to hear the preposition a all the time. For example, voy a Madrid. That's completely normal and actually more common in many situations. So don't start replacing every a with para. The important thing is understanding that para can point toward a destination. We also use para when something is intended for a particular person. In other words, the recipient. For example, este regalo es para ti. This gift is for you. Who receives the gift? You do. Tengo una pregunta para Ana. I have a question for Ana. The question is directed to Ana. O compré flores para mi madre. I bought flowers for my mother. My mother is the person who will receive the flowers. So when you can ask, who is this intending for? Think about para. Para is also very useful when talking about deadlines. Necesito esto para mañana. I need this by tomorrow. Tomorrow is the deadline, right? La tarea es para el viernes. The assignment is due for Friday. O tiene que estar listo para las 8. It has to be ready by 8 o'clock. Notice that once again, para is pointing forward. We're moving toward a future point, tomorrow, Friday, 8 o'clock. That's why thinking of para as an arrow pointing toward a goal can be very helpful. So let's put everything together. On one side, we have por. Think why. We use it for things such as reason, cause, movement through a place, exchange, and means or method. For example, lo hice por amor. I did it because of love. Love explains my reason. On the other side, we have para. Think what for? Purpose, destination, recipient, and deadline. For example, lo hice para ayudarte. I did it in order to help you. Helping you is my purpose. So, compare those two. Lo hice por amor. Why? Because of love. Lo hice para ayudarte. What for? To help you. That's distinction I really want you to remember. Before we test what you learn, let's make it even simpler. If you're explaining why something happened, think por. If you're explaining what you want to achieve, think para, okay? Por often looks at the reason behind the action, para often looks toward the result of the action. Again, it's not a perfect rule for every single sentence in the Spanish language, but when you're speaking and you suddenly think, wait, is this por or para? Start here. Why or what for? Okay? Now let's see if it works. It's your turn. I'm going to give you a few sentences and you need to decide whether we need por or para. You can pause the video before I give you the answers. And now you can check your answers. And as a final challenge, I want you to make this personal. Complete these two sentences. Estoy aprendiendo español. I'm learning Spanish because of. What's your reason? Okay. And the next one. Estoy aprendiendo español para. What's your goal? Okay. Notice how your reason and your goal are not necessarily the same thing. Try creating both sentences about yourself, okay? And most importantly, say them out loud. And this is exactly what we focus on at Spanish Fluency Club. Learning grammar is useful, learning vocabulary is useful, but if you want to speak Spanish confidently, at some point you need to use it. You actually have to use it. At SVC, we have live Spanish classes, real conversation practice, grammar lessons, pronunciation practice, and a community of Spanish learners practicing together. So if you're looking for a place where you can stop only studying Spanish and start actually speaking it, we'd love to have you with us. And that's it for today's lesson. If there is one thing I want you to remember is this. Por, why, para, what for. And don't worry if you make mistakes. The more Spanish you hear, and the more you use these words in real conversations, the more natural the difference will become. I'm Ale from Spanish Fluency Club. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Nos vemos.